I've been fired?
No, but you're concentrating on an ear for men now, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, that's where I was going with that. And we're here today talking about health and health issues relating to men in particular, obviously. And Paul, you started out, I remember that you put a video out and talked a bit about your experience using diet to control your diabetes, which you had a lot of success with, not only to control diabetes, but losing weight at the same time.
Yeah, knock on wood, it's been successful. I came upon the issue, quite honestly, like most men do, by becoming diabetic instead of eating healthy in my youth and taking care of myself. I ended up in the emergency room one day with an arrhythmia with, oh gosh, it's been a while since I've dealt with it, so I forgot what they've even called it, but AFib, afibrillation. And while I was in the emergency room with my heart doing the mamba in my chest, they tested me and my glucose was 575, which is like I was a walking, talking Tootsie Pop.
Wow. What is the normal upper limit for?
You're looking, if for somebody that's eating 100 to 110, the fasting, it should be a little lower than that, but it was nearly 5 or 6 times higher than it should have been. It was dangerously high, in other words. And that was the first indication. No, I take that back. That was not the first indication that I had diabetes. I'd been told years before that I was headed for diabetes, that I had what's called metabolic syndrome, which was basically eating too much, and especially eating the wrong foods and developing insulin resistance, which is what happens. You eat a lot of sugars, carbohydrates, things like that. It causes insulin spikes in your system. Eventually, you become insulin resistant, and then the next step, of course, of that is diabetes, which carries with it all kinds of nasty consequences: increased risk of stroke, heart attack, all kinds of wonderful things, blindness, cutting off toes and feet and things like that if you don't manage it. Luckily, it is a very manageable disease if you wise up and take it seriously. And you can do that through diet. And so far, what I've been able to do is get off of, I've returned my A1C to a completely normal range. For over a year now, I have been off of all medications for diabetes simply by managing my diet.
That's a big success story. And you lost a lot of weight in the process as well, right?
Well, I fluctuated. I lost 70 pounds. I mean, I certainly after the incidents of going to the hospital and all that, I became very serious for a very long time about not going back to the hospital. I lost 70 pounds. Then this last holiday season, I have put about 20 of it back on. But I've gone back and now I'm losing it again. And losing it is quite easy. It's just a matter of eating the right foods and, more importantly, staying away from the wrong foods.
The wrong foods being carbohydrates in general, right?
Carbohydrates, sugar is carbohydrate, right. But yes, staying away from simple carbohydrates, which are the ones that metabolize very quickly and cause insulin spikes. You stay away from those. If you're going to eat carbs, eat what's called slow carbs, the complex carbohydrates.
Like in whole grains and whatnot?
Yeah, but it's also important to note too, and the more research they're doing, is they're saying, don't think you can go wild on whole grains and have that be healthy for you, especially once you have diabetes. It may help you in the long run prevent it from happening, but it is not a great answer. You could, if you eat a bunch of whole wheat bread and a bunch of whole wheat pastas all the time, you can end up in trouble that
the
way.
Same kind of trouble with an overload, glucose overload, right?
You could still develop insulin tolerance and end up diabetic that way. The best course of action in general that I found, and again, I encourage people to do their own research, because there is a ton of bullshit about diet in the world out there. You really have to dig. But generally what I'm finding has worked for me is to keep my carbohydrates complex and keep them under 70 a day, under 70 carbs a day. And that actually affords you a fair amount of flexibility in your diet. But mainly what we're talking about is high protein, high fat. That's a funny thing about this is that we finally figured out they've had the food pyramid that they developed in the 50s. They're just starting to figure out that it's wrong. And they put wheats and grains at the top of the pyramid. They thought that was the healthy way to eat, totally ignoring the fact that when you want to fatten up cattle, you feed them corn, carbohydrates in high doses.
That's a good observation.
They've sort of ignored reality. And of course, then the food industry has invested a huge amount in high carbohydrate foods, stuff in the center aisles of supermarkets, infusing sugar into foods that don't need it to make them addictive. I mean, you're really up against, in our sort of red pill existence, we learn to unlearn a lot of things about life. In our case, in the men's movement, we unlearn a lot of stuff we've learned about women and about relationships and about sexual politics. This is one of those areas too, where you really have to go back and undo all the damage that's done from the bullshit information that's being sold to you by the government and by the food industry. There's a lot of money in treating these diseases that are caused by overeating. And of course, we got people out there with particularly feminists, which, I may curse myself later for trying to, appeal to them for some common sense. But we have a fat acceptance movement. And what that is a diabetes acceptance movement. It's a heart disease acceptance movement. It's a cancer acceptance movement. Obesity kills. It absolutely does. And it diminishes quality of life, and it causes those three big diseases, the diabetes, heart disease, and cancer.
And obesity is on the rise for quite a long time now.
It's in staggering proportions now. We have been infusing foods with sugar now for so long. I think I'll probably get nailed for getting these numbers not exactly right, but I know that somewhere in the neighborhood of around 1930, the average American consumed something like 4 pounds of sugar a year. And now it's over 100 pounds.
And of course, sugar is completely unnecessary in your diet. You can cut it down to 0 and be healthy, right?
And you will be a lot healthier.
A lot healthier, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one thing
unnecessary
to avoid. There's no RDA for sugar. And as a matter of fact, there's no RDA or recommended daily allowance for carbohydrates. There is none. You can live without carbohydrates. It's not ideal. But you can make it on protein and fats.
Fats alone, yeah.
And
there's a diet exactly around that, right? That's just protein and fat, like 0 carb diet. I forget the name of it. Somebody
ketogenic.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
And I've never tried that. I mean, I've never been particularly interested in going, 0 carbs. I don't think I would like it very much. And another thing that you run into that is an issue, I mean, we got to be frank about this stuff, is that people have a general cutoff, a tendency to cut off at a certain level of fats. There's only so much we can tolerate. That's why you don't see people eating like a stick of butter. Because
it feels bad just to hear
even the thought of that. Yes, because your body, you're going to have a natural cutoff on how much fat you can tolerate. And your body will shut you down from doing that, just like trying to eat a stick of butter. No matter how much you like butter, you're not going to have much luck with that.
No.
But carbohydrates, what happens with them is they bring you a lot of empty calories. It metabolizes very quickly and leaves you hungry. It causes a spike in your insulin, and that plummets, and you followed by hunger. And you become literally addicted. to it. This is, you know,
Self-perpetuating, and yeah.
when you pick up a loaf of bread, which has no reason whatsoever to have sugar in it, and you see that sugar is one of the ingredients in a plain loaf of bread, what you know is that they put that in there to addict you. Sugar is an addictive substance. And
it's dirt cheap too for them to buy and add to things.
Yep.
And this is an experience with me on peanut butter, is the same thing, is that I can't stomach the Kraft, the Skippy, those kind of peanut butters that are loaded up with sugar now, because I buy peanut butter that is just literally, it's just ground peanuts. And when you get it, it's oil on the top, so you have to stir it up quite a bit.
Yep.
But once, and this is just a little tip, if you put it in the fridge after you stir it up, it doesn't separate out again. At least not for a very, very long time. So it works quite well. But now that I've gotten used to that kind of peanut butter, I can't stomach the sweetened peanut butter.
And that's what will happen, is that if you start eating healthy, you end up detoxing from all the crap foods that you've been sold, all the carbohydrates, all the sugar that's been slid sort of underneath the table to you in a lot of food sources, and you start losing your taste for it. And it only takes 3 or 4 days. Most people give up before them because carbohydrates are so addictive. And a lot of people, I know, for instance, myself, I went through one phase years ago, back in the same time we did the conference in Detroit, and I was eating vegetarian.
Oh,
and
really?
And I did not, yeah, and I ate vegetarian for 2 years, and I didn't understand why I wasn't losing weight. Because I would think, okay, it's not meat, it's not animal fat, and I can promise you somebody will show up in the comments to this discussion talking about being vegan and recommending movies like Forks Over Knives and things like that. Been there, done that.
But you were still eating a lot of carbs then with that vegetarian diet.
I was eating a ton of carbs. As a matter of fact, I was probably eating more because I licensed myself to eat more of other foods because I wasn't eating animal protein.
Huh.
But the fact of the matter is, animal protein is good, my opinion. But from the research I've done, from the things that I've read, from the dietary sources I trust, I'm fine with animal protein. I'm fine with meat.
So the big three really is fish, beef, and chicken, basically, right? In terms of
I eat a lot less beef. I think red meat does have, if you overdo it, probably some not so positive effects. I eat a lot of chicken, a lot of fish, and I do get organic on the poultry because it's some pretty nasty stuff. If you don't,
the poultry industry is a bit suspicious as well. They use a lot of drugs and stuff, I think, in that. One of the reasons I wanted to get kind of kickstart this discussion with you, Paul, is that recently there was 2 guys who are Facebook friends and one fellow who's a friend in general that I hope one day will come on and talk to us about their experiences in losing quite a lot of weight by this by a couple of different methods. A lot of them are doing a couple of them are doing carbohydrate restriction, basically. Very strong carbohydrate restriction, and have had rapid weight loss. And in one case, the one fellow reported 50 pounds in, I think, around 2 months or something like this, a very large amount of weight loss. Now he had a lot to go, so some of that's probably water and whatnot. But I also been looking into this a bit myself, as over the years, I guess over the 10 or 15 years of work stress until recently, I put on about 50 pounds myself. And when I was approaching 200, I started to exercise quite a lot, tried thinking if I exercise, I'd be losing weight. And I was up to doing something like 40 kilometers on the bike and 3 to 5 kilometers in the pool in the same day. And I still didn't lose weight.
Wow.
I didn't know what was going on there. So anyways, I got pretty kind of, and I was getting hip pains and still having hip pains at that time and neck pains all the time and all this stuff. And I saw a video on a guy who was talking about some metabolic stuff, and I'm going to find those links that we can put them into the descriptions. And he was talking about your body's need to fast for some period of time on a regular basis. And he had propositioned that 16 hours a day you shouldn't eat. So basically, if you stop eating at 6 p.m., then you don't start again until 10 a.m. the next day. And apparently, that first 8 hours, your body processes all the stuff in your blood that you've eaten from your last time, but it takes about 8 hours roughly or so to do this stage of processing, after which your body has to use resources from within. And you want the diet part of it was you want to try and kick those use of those resources over to the use of fats, not proteins. And one of the ways to do that is to eat lots of protein, to kind of kick down the body's using protein as fuel. And when it does, it actually uses your muscle tissue and converts that into energy, which is not what you want. And right. So that the adding the protein prevents that from going. And then by not having a lot of carbs or reducing your carbs, you're kind of pushing your metabolism to using fats as an energy source, which is, ironically, the weird thing is the fats are the hardest thing for your body to use up as energy. I always thought
it's because your body will select the carbohydrates to metabolize.
Carbohydrates first. And the weird thing is, Paul, it'll select protein, muscle protein before fat even.
Yep.
This was like a news to me. I always presumed it would be for carbs, then fat, then muscle. But when somebody like goes on a fast, after a period of a couple of days, I think it is 2-3 days, your body actually starts to dig into muscle tissue for energy.
Yep.
So one of the things this fellow was pointing out is that you need to have the protein present in your blood to prevent that from happening. And another thing that I've tried is getting in the gym, because building muscle consumes protein that you eat and converts into muscle, and more muscle burns energy even while you're sitting around.
Yes, it boosts your metabolism. Every time you exercise, and there's hours. It's one of the reasons they recommend exercising in the morning instead of at night, because exercise has a tendency to raise your metabolism and keep you up.
But there's another advantage to this is the extra muscle mass. That muscle, even when you're just sitting there, it's like an idling V8 engine, right? That idling V8 engine uses more gas than an idling 4-cylinder engine. And with a car, it's even more than that, because with a car, you drive it, you don't idle that much, you turn it off. But with a body, it never turns off.
Right.
So you're idling your body probably 20 hours a day. Your body sits on idle 20 hours a day, roughly speaking.
Yep.
If those are big muscles, they're going to be using up more energy than small muscles. So I thought I'd throw that out there. Now, to get down to some specifics, Paul, like in sort of, if someone has a bad diet and they want to switch this kind of health thing around, what kind of specific patterns or what have you tried in terms of, like, when in the day do you eat? Do you eat in the morning mostly, at the midday, or do you spread it through the day? Or
I'm ridiculously undisciplined about the timing of my food, and I probably could improve that a lot more, but I generally start each day in the morning with a brand called Carb Master yogurt, just a simple yogurt that I have in the morning. It has like 5 grams of carbohydrate per container. And then if I'm still hungry, which I frequently am, I'll make something like eggs and sausage. It's a perfectly great. Eggs come down to a little bit less than 1 carb a piece, so a couple of eggs. And sausage, all meat sausage that has no carbs in it. You can start a day with the yogurt and a big breakfast like that on, 7 or 8 carbs max.
Now, do you count your carbs, your protein, your fats, and your total calories? Do you kind of keep it running track of all this?
I don't care about fat. Don't really care that much about calories. What I care about is calculating my net carbs, and you do
Net
that
carbs.
by subtracting fiber. Whatever, say if you've got something that has 10 carbohydrates in a serving and it has 3 grams of dietary fiber, you subtract that from the total for
Oh,
seven net carbs.
so when they rate these things down, the total carbs includes the fiber that you can't digest.
Well, right. Well, it'll give you the total carbs on the package, and then it will say whatever amount of dietary fiber there is.
So just to be clear, that total includes the dietary fiber part of it.
No, it does
You have to
not. You have
subtract
to.
it out.
You have to subtract it
Yeah,
yourself.
that's what I meant. Like it's if it says 10 and 3, it's 7 is your your carbs that you actually absorb.
Right.
Right. Okay.
And it is, which makes high fiber food, which are naturally good for you anyway. I mean, stuffs like avocados that have a lot of fat and a lot of fiber have very much lower net carbs and an abundant amount of fiber, which is really good for your system anyway. I mean, you should be aiming to pick foods like that.
Well, one of my own personal experience just last fall is that when I first read this, saw this one guy's video talking about this stuff, I decided to give it a shot because I really wasn't losing any weight. And so I tried to stop eating at 8 p.m. and not eat till noon the next day, which I thought it would be hard, but it actually was kind of easy. The one thing that I did have in the morning was green tea with ginger in it, no sugar, no whatnot. So just sip on green tea with ginger, and the ginger really kind of soothes your stomach. So I didn't feel hungry at all. And in fact, by the time it came to noon, oftentimes I didn't even think to eat because the green tea with ginger kind of completely wipes out my appetite. And in 6 weeks, I lost almost 20 pounds, between 50 and 20 pounds. I didn't measure myself exactly when I started that, but when I got at the end of about 6 weeks, I noticed, geez, my pants are loose. So I thought, I'll go weigh myself, see what's going on here. And I was down to 175. And
Outstanding.
yeah, I was really surprised. So I thought, this guy's onto something. Because between noon and 8, I wasn't really doing anything dieting. I was mostly trying to eat more protein. So fish, chicken, eggs, milk. Milk has a surprising amount of protein in it. I didn't know that before looking into it either. But it does. It has actually a really good source of protein. But and I try to keep the carbs down because as one fellow was saying, that carbs really are a bad actor all around. Like
I mean, if you can pinpoint one thing that is a constant certain about diet, it is that carbs are bad.
Carbs are bad.
Get rid of them. And
like you were saying earlier, I didn't aim and I don't aim to get rid of them altogether because I'll still eat some bread or some crackers, and I'm not sticking rigidly to anything. There's some days I miss that whole time frame thing too, and I'm not beating myself over the head about it. I think over the long run is what really matters. If you miss out on a couple of days here and there. But the one thing I put really strong in my patterns right now is to get to the gym. And I think that's done that in combination with this diet as I feel a lot better all around. I don't have hip pains. I don't have neck pains anymore. So it's a whole range of benefits that have come about as a result of that.
And yeah, I didn't even mention that. I tend to focus my attention in terms of things like my A1C and, where my glucose is and whether or not I'm on medication. But the dietary change also brought with it a very big increase in energy and sense of well-being that I had not had for years. Even before I was diabetic, I felt lousy because I was eating lousy food all the time. And of course, I either, just failed to make the connection or didn't want to make the connection between that massive bowl of pasta and feeling like crap all afternoon. I thought, God, could there be a connection here? No, there can't possibly be because I love pasta.
I remember when you were eating that pasta stuff because we had talked and you had just come back from Italy and you were talking about the great pasta you had everywhere.
I did, and I ate it. I mean, how can you be in Italy and not have pasta?
It's pretty hard to avoid.
Yeah. But I think I could do it now without a problem. I just don't eat the stuff. And a lot of this process for me, it's one of the reasons I really, not just glad about this stuff for the health benefit of the information, but this is to me more red pilling. You know, we literally have been lied to about food our whole lives. We're getting lied to every day. You can go in a grocery store right now and find all kinds of labels, heart healthy and stuff like that, on foods that are crap for you, that's terrible. You know, brands like Snackwells that are just pure carbohydrate,
Pure
and,
carbs,
and they're
sugar.
marketed as a health food.
I've got another example of that too, because being into trying to do my gym thing now and build a little bit of muscle, I carry around the protein bars just in case I'm hungry and I don't want to have to go into some fast food thing to get the little hunger off, right? So I carry a little protein bar around with me in case that comes up, and I eat that. But I looked at some of these protein bars. Some of the ones that I was eating is really not very much protein and a whole pile of sugar in them.
Yes.
And then they'll advertise it as a protein bar, and you read it, and there's like, what, 5 grams of protein, and then all these sugars and carbs. And I thought,
yeah, and you know, if you're a 24-year-old athlete with 3.5% body fat and you just rode 18 miles uphill on a bicycle, yeah, it's okay to eat one of those.
yeah.
But they're not health foods, and
Most of them are not good.
Them as health foods all the time, and they are literally killing people with food that's being labeled as heart healthy and diet, you know, sensible diet food. And that makes it sort of another one of those things in life. I mean, I think people that gravitate toward men's issues a lot of ways and toward the red pill like to myth bust.
Yeah.
And to cut through bullshit in the world. And another benefit that I really believe that it gave me was I had smoked until 7 years ago. And I finally quit smoking and managed to get myself addicted to nicotine lozenges, which is a hell of a lot better choice than smoking cigarettes. But after I got the weight off and got feeling better, I was able finally to get off of the nicotine lozenges. And so now I'm not a slave to that either. And to me, this is literally about slavery. They're addicting us to garbage foods to make a profit, and then it gives us diseases, and they make a profit off of that. There is a totally unholy alliance between the pharmaceutical medical industry and the food industry. When you start digging into that, you find stuff that makes your skin crawl.
Didn't doctors at one point promote smoking as a health benefit, to kind of perk you up?
Oh, yeah.
And of course, the cigarette industry really fought back hard against the cancer research.
Yes. Oh, they fought back again and had something like 11 tobacco company executives sit before Congress and swear that nicotine or cigarettes were not addictive.
Yeah.
I wish somebody would have passed me that note.
You remember that? Did you ever see that movie, Thank You for Smoking?
Yes.
That was good, eh?
Yes, it was about the tobacco
comedy, really.
Obvious. Yeah, it was a very dark comedy.
Dark comedy, yeah.
But
they got their points across.
And that is the sort of thing we're dealing with food. Just people just don't realize it. That you know, every fast food joint in the country is selling you poison.
So, what do you think about the fasting aspect of diet?
Well, it's a little different for me as a diabetic. One of the things that I know is that if I go too long without eating, I start feeling bad.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that going 16 hours a day would be an optimum thing for me to do.
If you're a diabetic kind of person, that'd be a problem for sure.
It could be. I mean, it's certainly, especially as a diabetic, I wouldn't do it unless I had some sound medical, support and advice about what I was doing. But
so you want to pay attention to how you're feeling when you try new things like that.
And that's one thing, young men won't notice. When I was in my 20s, I could eat like an absolute pig and I go play softball and would feel great, no problem. But when you start getting older, you feel what you eat a
Yeah.
great deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one thing you can absolutely trust. And I had that issue for years. I would eat high carbohydrate meals, feel like crap, and refuse to make a connection between the two because I wanted to eat the high carbohydrate foods.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been there. I've eaten an awful lot of Doritos and regretted it.
Yeah.
more times than I care to remember. There
But
was one.
I do hope that, whoever it was in your audience that was talking about losing weight I hope some of the guys contact you and maybe come on a discussion and talk about this, because this is some really great information that benefits men. And it's one of the things that we don't do very well as men. We don't take care of ourselves.
Well, I
And
hope just so the audience pays attention to that, and if you have success stories or if you have struggles, one of the things we're hoping to do, and I was hoping with you in this, Paul, is that we can kind of get other people's ideas, what worked for them, what doesn't work for them, and maybe guys can get some encouragement out of and reaching those kind of goals they want to. I just want to throw this one. There's one fellow that was saying that he fasts every second day. Now, I haven't tried that because a whole 24 hours day, for me, it sounds hard. I'll try it sometime, but he was doing every second day, and he lost a ton of weight. That was the fellow who said he lost about 50 pounds in a short order. And
yeah, I talked to him too, and he has done very well.
Great. And he says he doesn't have a problem. Like he drinks coffee in the day that he fasts. And then I think the only thing he pays attention to on the eating day is not having too much carbs, as far as my memory was, what he said. Did he talk about that with you, Paul?
Yeah, that was pretty much the plan. Just avoided a lot of the simple carbs, didn't go overboard even on complex carbs, and fasted every other day.
Yeah.
And I'm sure for him, I mean, he's dropped a lot of weight and very quickly.
Right.
And not that I'm recommending fasting. Like I said, I won't recommend anything that I haven't done myself, but the portion of it of getting away from the carbs, it's the simplest thing in the world. All you got to do is detox, go through a little bit of withdrawal. And there is a withdrawal from eating the so-called normal, North American diet.
Not to mention just the habit changing. It takes a long time just to actually change a habit, even if it's not addictive or you're not addicted to this thing. Just a pure habit change can take a couple of months even, and depending who you are, I suppose.
Yeah, it can. But the good news is with eating this way, you will see results very quickly.
Yeah.
If you cut carbs down to way low, then don't eat sugar and stick with high protein and high fat stuff, you will lose weight.
And just to tie off the fasting aspect of it, and if somebody's out there who's familiar with the bio processes related to this, my understanding from what I said, and I could have this wrong, so do correct me in the comments, is that by doing some period of fasting, at least more than 8 hours after you last eat, it forces your body into a mode of keeping those metabolic processes open that will help you burn fat. So long as you don't go into protein deficiency. You want to avoid protein deficiency so that you don't start digging into your muscles, which you want, because they not only help you feel better and stronger, but they also burn energy for you while you're sleeping.
Take that, vegans.
Boom.
And they will be in your comments. Raising a stink. They certainly came into mine. I did a video about one way of avoiding carbs is to generally avoid food that's white.
Right.
Potatoes, avoid sugar, avoid bread. I mean, you start looking, there's a couple of exceptions. Cauliflower is really good for you. All the cruciferous vegetables are good for you. But for the most part, if you avoid white foods, you'll be avoiding a ton of carbs.
I'm guessing that it's possible for vegans to have a high protein, low carb diet, but I don't know anything about it. Maybe someone who has been able to do that can enlighten us on it. I just think it's a lot easier if you're eating fish, chicken, and meat, or some combination of it, because the proteins are so easy to get, out
If
of
if
those.
if you look, and this is pure human physiology. If you watch any of the survival shows where people have to scrounge in the wilderness for food, their number one objective is protein,
Right.
because humans are omnivores, but we need protein. And
That's right.
we didn't get to mix rice and beans 6,000 years ago. We had to take what was out there, and what was out there was animals.
Animals. Just the other part of the whole fasting thing, this is interesting to me too, which I was surprised at when I looked into it a little bit, is that if you have a long-term fast for starving to death, let's say, your body will actually even start to use your heart muscle. I don't know why that evolutionarily happens, but it will, like you would have, before I would have thought that your evolution would have required us to preserve your muscles because you're going to need those to survive, right? But evidently, no, muscle tissue actually is used up for energy pretty early on in the starvation process. And I don't remember the exact time, but it's less than 2 or 3 days. I think if you fast one day, I think you're probably okay. You're not really digging into muscle tissue too much. But I think if you're 3 days or more, your body actually is getting rid of tissue that you don't want to get rid of, including heart muscles. So something to be aware of, the importance, and that all drives back to the importance of proteins, as being protein being your most important macronutrient. I think fats are up there too.
Well, you've just convinced me not to fast. But I do have something else that is working. And I'm sure that the fasting is, I know, again, the gentleman we discussed a little bit on his case, he's fasting for every other day, and it's working like gangbusters for him.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the keys. Like, people are different in what they like, how they respond to different things, both mentally and physically. So try things that different strategies until you find something that's working for you. But do keep an eye out for the healthy aspect of it. You don't want to like try on some diet and then end up in the hospital for some unforeseen reason,
And again, be careful where you get your information. One of the things that I was handed when I was diagnosed with diabetes was the American Diabetes Association recommended diet, which is fucking garbage. It is a diet that will literally give you diabetes.
So where did you find the diet you ended up following? Or where did you get your information?
I've done a lot of research, and I found one website, and there's several really very decent websites on keto lifestyle, on paleo diet, and low carb diets. But I refer to one regularly called dietdoctor.com. I don't have any, I'm not plugging them for money or anything like that. But the information there is very solid, very good. Highly recommend it to anybody if they want to educate themselves about how to eat in a healthy way, especially if they're interested in getting rid of these garbage carbohydrates out of their diet. That's a really good place to go.
Now, we've stressed here in the whole conversation that carbohydrates are like the devil, but there's also a danger of zero carbohydrates, and that has its own problems, right? If you're going to extreme zero carbohydrates, you might want to research that very well and see that you don't get into some kind of serious trouble doing that.
And personally, I don't think that is wise, and it's not necessary. You can have a good, healthy diet without totally eliminating carbohydrates. I mean, I guess I get why some people want to do that. But I can tell you, I know for a fact, it's not necessary to lose weight. And it's not necessary. You can, just with a reasonable cutting away of carbs in your diet, you can do something like, it took me 6 months. In 6 months, I had my A1C in normal range.
And remind me, what's A1C again?
That's it's a glucose test. It's the sort of the gold standard for diabetics.
And you're heading to 100 is what you want on that, or something?
No, that is blood glucose, which is a different reading. A1C, you're diabetic when you're in a like 7.0 range, 6.8, stuff like that. I had mine the first time I tested it after I had a glucose of 575. The first A1C I had 7.2. I took it a couple more times, but 6 months after that, I was down to 5.3, where it's been pretty much ever since, which is dead in the middle of normal.
Normal is 5.
5.3 is where I've been, and it's in normal range. I don't recall exactly what the ranges are.
Okay.
Easy to Google and find out, though.
But around 7 is where diabetic starts.
Yep. I think really get any higher than 6.4, 6.5, you're starting to get in to that range.
And how long did you say you're under control now with that?
Over a year.
No drugs, no pills, no nothing?
Nothing. I was on metformin for several months and lost the weight, got the A1C back to normal, and quit taking the metformin, got the doctor to okay it.
And then it's been quite a while since that process.
And I probably had a couple of times because, one of the things, this is an addiction. And like I said, at one point I put another 20, 25 pounds back on, eating crappy food during the holidays.
Paul, let me ask you this. Is there a stressor that triggers this for you? A stressor in your life, or is it stress related that makes you go back for that comfort food, if you will?
That's a really good question. I think it is. I think most eating is emotional on some level. I mean, you think about it. How many times are you really hungry? Now, when I was, again, in my 20s and working out regularly and very robust lifestyle, I would get hungry fairly often. But after I got into my 30s, most of the time I ate. I didn't feel hunger going on. Eating out of habit, eating out of boredom, eating out of maybe stress, eating because something is on TV and I want to do something with my hand and mouth while I'm watching TV. I mean, a lot of this is just, we eat a lot more than we ever need to. And I think a lot of it is emotional. A lot of it is stress related. And of course, that's one of the evil things about eating to cope with stress, is that you get diseases, and which gives you a lot more stress than you had beforehand. But yeah, I think that's a lot of it. I think if people ask themselves every time they were going to eat, do I really want this? Am I really hungry?
Did they ask themselves, like, what am I stressed about? Or for me, a lot of it, sometimes when I was eating a lot of chips and Doritos and whatnot, it was because I want to avoid having to deal with some stressful thing. And that'd take my mind off it. I could sit there, watch TV and munch down these sticks. And I got some stressful thing to do. I don't really freaking want to do it. But, so the eating is kind of an avoidance behavior there in a sense. Well,
and you can trade it out, though. There are certainly healthier snack foods than Doritos. And those are, Doritos, Cheetos. That's kind of part of what my thing was too. Entire bags of them gone.
Been there
in 30 minutes. But there is a lot of stuff you can eat. And what I have found for myself, I don't know what it would be like for anybody else, is that when I have to make a decision, okay, what healthy snack am I going to have? What am I going to invest in now in order to have a healthy snack? A lot of times I'll just skip the snack. Because if I have to actually do something for it, if I can't just go grab a bag and open it and start eating.
That's one of the dangers right there, the accessibility, right?
Absolutely. It's instant satisfaction. But if I got to go prepare something, put it on a plate and eat it, then that takes more energy and it takes more thought. So I'm less likely to even go for the healthy snack.
You know, this reminds me, I shared an apartment, or I had an apartment above a house where this guy I lived with owned the house. I had a little apartment above, and he had his two daughters below, and we shared the kitchen. And he used to prepare up chopped like vegetables, like celery sticks, carrots, broccoli, whatnot, and put them on the table as quick snacks when his daughters were there. Just for that very reason, because they come in and whatever is really accessible is going to be, and easiest to do is going to be what you probably eat.
Yep.
If they're not there, they're going to go in and get cookies, crackers, chips, because they're right there in a box ready to pop them in your mouth.
And of course, another way to deal with that that's really effective is not to have that shit in your home to begin with.
Yeah.
Anybody that's serious about, approaching their health differently and eating differently, one of the things you really want to do is go through your house with a big plastic trash bag and go into the pantry and go into the fridge and pull all the poison out of your kitchen and throw it away.
Right.
And then, of course, the junk food junkie in me wants to say, but I paid for that. It's wasteful. Yeah. Well,
Wasteful.
Yeah. Diabetes.
It belongs down here, right?
Yes, exactly. I have this coming to me, but it's really a good idea. Throw the garbage away, and
don't buy it in the first place, right?
And don't be brainwashed by food companies into buying garbage, because they don't care if you get sick or not.
No, they don't. And just touching back on when you were saying about like when you're reaching for a snack, if you have to prepare it. For me, what I've noticed a lot of times since I'm trying to kind of get my habits better, a lot of times I go down to the kitchen, I'm looking for something to eat, and I ask myself, I'm not even hungry. Why am I in the kitchen? I have to go through this mental process of, why am I down here in the kitchen looking for something to eat and not even the slightest bit hungry? And usually there's something that's bothering me that caused me that I want to get away from something that's bothering me here. And the kitchen is like a comfort place, right? You got all this, you got food down there. Who doesn't like food? Good food, bad food, whatever it is.
It's very nurturing.
Better than all those stresses in your life. And that's why I'm down in the kitchen. It's because, and that part of my strategy is I'm trying to get rid of as many stresses in my life as possible, so that there's fewer of those things that are kind of pushing me in the wrong direction.
Well, I tell you what, going your own way will get rid of some of your stress.
Yeah.
There's some stressors you won't have to deal with.
Well, there's a lot less today than there was 2-3 years ago already. But you can't avoid all stresses in life. New things come up and take their places from time to time, but I'm trying to kind of work through them as they come up instead of kind of let it linger. And that's probably been a bad habit of mine, is letting bad things in my life or stressful things linger longer than they have to, not process them through and out as quickly as I could have,
Part of that male conditioning. And again, it's why I like these subjects so much. I mean, I love talking about men's issues, and this is a men's issue. We're conditioned to devalue ourselves. People even mock us. Men won't go to the doctor, like that's some sort of joke. And what it is that men are constantly conditioned to not take care of themselves, to focus on producing. And hopefully, whatever positives that the men's movement, red pill, MGTOW, whatever you want to call it, whatever you do in this sort of alternative universe for men that we've created on the internet, hopefully you begin to challenge that shit too, and make commitments to yourself that, something, the Cheetos taste great for a while, but it's like smoking or anything else. It will cause problems.
That's a great point to end on, I think. Do you think, Paul?
Yeah.
Right there. Have we been on here a good length of time? And I think covered a lot of ground. And I want to encourage any viewers to contact either Paul or I, especially if you have some success stories, or if you have challenges that you might want to share with us. I think if we can help and help each other along, kind of move our lives in a healthier manner, I think that'd be great. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for joining me, Paul. You have
and before we close out, let me, if you don't mind, I would like to plug one thing for my Patreon. Every Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we have a group meeting. It's not group therapy. It's just a bunch of red pill guys meeting via Zoom, the format that you're watching us on right now. And we talk about all kinds of things. And you can do something as inconsequential as pledge $1 per video.